Hello and welcome to Right On, the podcast from Final Draft. This is the show where we talk about all things screenwriting. I'm your host, Phil Galasso. Today we have an interview with Danny Strong, creator of Dopesick.
I know most people don't think about us up there in the mountains. Many of my patients are miners. It's dangerous work, and they carry the burden of building this nation on their backs. They're in pain. These people, my people, trusted me. I can't believe how many of them are dead now.
We've begun looking at something that could be big.
OxyContin.
Purdue Pharma, they've been marketing the drug as something that's non-addictive when it clearly is.
All your doctors are going to be asking, how is this even possible? Your most effective talking point are these magic words.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%.
They told me that less than 1% would become addicted.
If OxyContin does what I think it can, it could soon become Purdue's first billion-dollar drug.
Purdue continues to lie about the drug's safety to doctors, to patients, and the FDA.
I think I can make this the biggest drug in the world.
Danny and guest host Sharday Sellers discussed why he decided to tell this story now, his research process, his approach to telling a compelling story based on real-life events, and more. Check it out.
Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. It's Sharday here again, taking over for Phil, but I am so excited and blessed and lucky and humbled to be able to interview this person today because I've been such a huge fan for so long, and it's Mr. Danny Strong. Hello.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
You don't understand. When they emailed me to say, hey, would you like to interview Danny Strong? I couldn't have written back faster. I said, Are you kidding? And I'll save all my fangirl questions for the end because I really want to talk about the show because I was lucky enough to watch it over the weekend and my mind is blown.
Wow. How many did I get through?
I got through 2 because I just got it on Friday, and I'm okay with that because I like to also watch shows with audiences on Twitter. Like I love that whole interaction of like, did you guys see?
Fun.
It's so fun. But even after the first 2 episodes, I'm a little tempted to go back and just finish it and binge it, but I'm trying hard not to do that.
Yeah. Well, we've I think sent out all but the last one.
Yes, you did. Yeah. So I could theoretically do it, but also I'm like, let's just wait to premiere so me and my friends can just gush about it online.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know anyone who wouldn't know you, but you have been in this game for so long. I mean, you're Danny Strong, writer, actor, producer, director. You could do anything and tell any story you want. So why particularly this story and why right now?
Well, this story, this producer, John Goldwyn, came to me and said, do you want to write and direct a movie about the opioid crisis? And I read this New Yorker article, and he had read it as well. And kind of a lot of people read it about the Sackler family that this guy, Patrick Radden Keefe, had written. And so it sort of blew the topic up into a discussion, right? And because it made the link between the Sacklers owning OxyContin and thus, being morally responsible for the opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. And so when I started researching it, I was blown away. I call it the Purdue Pharma rabbit hole. The more you learn about them, the clearer and clearer that they are just a full-fledged criminal organization. And that the lying, it's not just that they lied to doctors and they said it was not as dangerous as it was, it exactly is, right? It's the extent of their lies, their manipulation, their influence peddling, the way that no matter what information came their way, what articles came their way about dangers, abuse, crime rates, and no matter what investigations people were doing into them, all they did was continue to lie and maneuver through it as hard as they could. And even when they pled guilty to a major felony, hundreds of millions of dollars in fines, several executives claiming guilty to misdemeanors. And it was a big sort of controversy about why they weren't charged with felonies, right? And the show goes into all that. You find out watching the show why that happened, even with all that. So, and that's when our show ends around there. So what did they do? Do they change their ways? Do they stop marketing as hard as they can? Do they show any compassion for the victims whatsoever? No, they sell harder. They push even harder. And it's just one of those stories where it's never not shocking. It's never, and you start to become a little bit desensitized. It's like when someone is just, constantly involved in criminal behavior. It's like, oh, they robbed another liquor store. And you think, well, I can't be shocked anymore. They've done it 5 times. It actually started to happen with this story where it was like a new thing would come out. And it's like, well, of course Purdue did that. That's what they do. That's the Purdue playbook.
Right.
Yeah. I remember interviewing someone close to the investigation, and I was taking him through something Purdue had done that he had forgotten about because it had just been 15 years or 16 years since he'd thought about any of this, right? Or was involved. And then I explained what had happened, and he just started laughing. And he said, oh, yeah, that sounds like the Purdue Pharma I know.
Because it would be unbelievable, right? Like it would be, no one would do this, but they did.
Over and over and over again. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to make a show about that. We're going to make a show about all these lies. And, every episode is basically structured, sort of the spine of it is a different piece of evidence that the U.S. Attorney's Office put together. So, we've got 4 intertwining stories, but sort of for me as a writer, the guiding post of each episode was a different criminal, a different criminal campaign, a different lie, a different manipulation. So there's usually some shocking moment in the episode where you find out what Purdue did and you just think, I can't believe Purdue actually just did what I just saw them do.
No, that actually is a great setup for my next question, because for storylines, but also different timelines as well, future and past, structurally as a screenwriter, how are you keeping track of all of this when you're writing, when you're building? Like, what is the outline process for a show like this?
Yeah, it was the most difficult thing I've ever worked on structurally, because the 4 intertwining worlds would have been difficult enough, but they take place in 3 different time periods. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want it to be 3 different time periods. I wanted it to be 2 different time periods, but the DEA investigation, it just happened when it happened. Yes. So I couldn't put that in one or the other timeline. I had to give it its own timeline. And I remember the day that I realized that it wasn't going to work in one of the other storyline timelines, that I had to give it its own timeline. I kind of threw my arms up and like, well, I already made this hard enough. Why not make it harder?
Right.
And I just kind of went for it. And it was particularly complicated, but then you kind of start to get a rhythm to it. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you start to realize, well, I just need to stay. The kind of one of the key things for me was to not jump timelines scene to scene. Mm-hmm. Like if I was in a timeline, to try to stay in it for 3 scenes or sometimes a whole act. Can I just stay in a timeline for a whole act? And the longer I could do that, the cleaner and the clearer it was. And so that becomes another set of handcuffs, for you in the show, in the construction, because you're like, okay, well, I just can't jump to this scene because I'm trying to do 2 to 4 or 5 scenes in one timeline. So then it becomes another, either obstacle or perhaps guiding post, if you want to be a glasses half full type person, which I'm usually not.
Well, visually, what does that look like as well as the page? Is it different page colors for timelines? Is it different fonts for timelines?
No, I usually don't do that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Our writer's room was virtual, and I had an awesome group because it was the pandemic started a week before. No, we had 2 weeks of the writer's room before the pandemic shut the room down. And then we went virtual. So we only did note cards, and I was only there the first week because I had to do a scouting trip for week 2. So then I was back for week 3 to the end of it, and we were virtual by then. Mm-hmm. And the virtual was hard. So one of the ways that I sort of dealt with it was that I just started doing my own outlines. So I would be taking notes and doing outlines. So I would be show running and working as a writer's assistant at the same time. And it would sort of confuse the staff. They'd be like, are you sure? Because I'd be like, hold on, I'm just writing this down. And then our writer's assistant was awesome. So she was doing it as well, right? And she was taking a set of notes as well. But I just found it easier for me to just take the notes. So there were no note cards. Like the note cards kind of ended early and there was no color coding. It was just me kind of typing and then sort of putting it together after the fact. It sounds crazy in retrospect, but it works, No,
but if it works for you, my type A personality is like, I need everything colored and different fonts. I need to see it.
Yeah. It seemed like I'm trying to remember if that first week we were doing different cards, different colors for the cards, but I can't remember because it was so long ago.
Let's talk about this writer's room really quick then. So how are you selecting the writers to work on this project?
Yeah, it was a unique situation because I wasn't planning on having a writer's room. I had done so much research, and because it's essentially a true story, and I had even sketched out the season in rough form as far as what it would be. Now that changed once the room started, and the room was awesome. I was so glad I ended up doing it. But because I had so much sketched out, I wanted to keep the room really small. It was a weird thing where I developed the show and I sold the show to 20th, and then Fox 21 bought the book Dope Sick by Beth Macy because they didn't know that I had sold my show to 20th. So I read about that on Deadline. That the sister studio has just created a rival project to my project. But they were in bad shape because I had a pitch ready to go and they just had a book, and it can take 6 months to a year to 2 years to find a writer when you've got, a piece of source material. So they asked us to team up, and they asked me to team up with them. And I read the book, and the book's really powerful and terrific. And then I met with Beth Macy, and I just loved her. She's a great person. And I thought, well, it'll be cool. So that's actually why I decided to do a writer's room, was because they guaranteed Beth Macy that she'd get to be a writer on the show. And so I was like, okay, well, you know what? All right, I'll do a writer's room then. And then I'll just keep it really small. And my long-term assistant, who was also my researcher, I hired him to be in the room. And so it was his first writing job, but he had done so much research for me. So I felt like him and Beth Macy were these kind of two experts on the crisis, and I'd done a tremendous amount of research as well. And so then I was looking for two upper level writers, and I was kind of looking for people that had rural experience. I wanted the voice of Appalachia to feel authentic. That was at the time one of my biggest concerns. And so I ended up with two writers, Owen O'Donnell and Jessica Mecklenburg, who both had these samples that were awesome. They had these terrific samples, and they were kind of rural. One was in Montana, it was set in Montana. The other was set in Arkansas. And then I met with them, and they were completely cool. So that was how I came to put that room together.
And I love
wanted
that.
Someone with opioid, with addiction, that had addiction in their background in some level. And I'm not going to say who was, but there was one of the writers did. So that's another element that I thought would be important for the room.
That's so interesting you said that, because what I like about the show is I, of course, have heard about this epidemic for years, but I guess I've been very sheltered blissfully and in my bubble that I don't know anyone, at least I think I don't know anyone who's been affected by it. So when I'm watching the show, I'm learning about it, honestly, as a first-time viewer. And then I think I had an existential crisis over the weekend because of your show, because I realized everything is manipulated, from how I get my drugs to who gives me my drugs to how they're sold. And I just never put that together in my mind, I guess, before. And then I'm watching your show and I'm like, is anything real? Do I have control over anything in my life? So I think that's awesome that someone has that firsthand experience to really guide the ship, because I think it's an important experience to have when you're working on a show like this. But in terms of the characters for the show, because those are my favorite, actually. I'm from Michigan. So It's not Appalachia, it's not Montana, but it's very rural. actually, and it's very country, believe it or not. It's in the North, but it's very country. How is the character building with the room? Are you trusting the writers who have lived the experience to say, no, this is how you would do it?
Kind of all the above. I mean, literally all the above. We're constructing stuff. A lot of it's research based on the actual events of the investigation, the U.S. Attorney's investigation. There's a lot of information that's been written about them. It's been covered in multiple books. The book Pharma covers it incredibly well. Painkiller covers it very well. Dopesick covers it very well. Right. So there was that element of it. Then as far as the authenticity of it, it was, sometimes people's experiences in the room, but, you don't always have to live something to write about it. So sometimes it's just people's,
imagination.
It's an imagination. Yeah.
Writers.
Exactly.
In terms of the research and the fact-based stuff, I do want to ask, what's the balance between we need to tell the truth and how it happened, but also this is television. We also need to make it interesting for people because some of that stuff could be boring.
Yeah. Well, the hope was that the truth was interesting. And in this case, I found the truth completely fascinating. At the same time, you have to dramatize it in a way that may not be exactly how it happened. But the truth is there might be a lot of people that no one remembers exactly how it did happen. Right. So a technique I use in nonfiction dramatic storytelling like this is that there are scenes that are there as a conduit, a fictional scene that's there as a conduit to get true facts out. So that the goal of the scene is to get real, true information out. And yes, if the scene is fictionalized in order to do so, it's fine because at the end of the day, what the scene is about is a truthful concept, idea, something along those lines. So that's sort of a major guiding post for me.
Okay. Does that also work when you've written also political nonfiction as well? So you used that previously before? That's
where I developed the concept.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I would, there would be people that would read the script. I remember on Recount, which was the first nonfiction narrative I wrote, and we gave the script to the two lead characters on the Republican side and on the Democrat side. We thought that was really fair, and we valued what their feedback would be because we were trying to make it feel truthful and be honest and fair. I remember one of them, and I'm not going to say which party it was because then you'll know who it was. Yeah. But they said, that scene you wrote, that didn't happen. And I said, oh, well, so are you uncomfortable with it? Do you think we should cut it? And you went, oh, no, don't cut it. Those are great lines. Which is like, no, that's a great scene. Don't cut it. So he just wanted us to know that it didn't happen. So I was completely comfortable with it in a show that millions of people are now going to watch. And I experienced that over and over on these stories where people just get it. They get that you're doing a dramatization. They get that these are actors and that the core essence of it that's being relayed is truthful and honest. And if it's not truthful, then they might come out after you.
Yeah, I think
they come out after me when I did totally tell the truth too. So that happens as well.
I'm sure. And I'm sure there'll be lots to say for people when they watch this series, depending on who they are and what side they fell on. I want to ask, because we only have a few minutes left, a little fluff questions. How was it working with the greatest Batman we'll ever have? No shade to anyone else.
No shade. To Val Kilmer, obviously.
Yes. Yes. I was talking about Val Kilmer.
Brother Val, we love you too. I would say that the Rosario Dawson summed it up best. She calls him Michael, my forever Batman, Beetlejuice Keaton. Yeah. Michael Keaton is the coolest of all time, like he's
Birdman. Of course, he's so cool.
He's such a great guy. He's probably the most down-to-earth superstar I've ever encountered, where he's just down to earth and you talk to him and he's funny and, like you think Michael Keaton was funny and he actually is funny. So it was awesome. And his performance in the show is staggering. Mm-hmm. Staggering performance. And he just showed up and just delivered, behind the camera, as a person and in front of the camera as an actor.
I just adore him. So I'm always afraid to meet my heroes. And when I hear they're actually really nice people, it makes me so happy.
Isn't it the best? Because it doesn't always go that way.
I know it usually doesn't. Okay. And then I have to ask, because I'm the biggest nerd in the world, if you can't tell, Jonathan from Buffy. Yeah. What
that was me. I played that part.
That was you.
Oh my gosh, we did it.
Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Buffy.
I played Jonathan.
TV Jonathan. What side do you think he would fall on? Would he be the one? I mean, let's think about Jonathan season 6, I guess, or season 5 when he's evil. Would he fall on Big Pharma side if he were alive today?
He would be like at Big Pharma and scared because he knows it's wrong and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he would just
I don't know what to do. And I think this isn't right, but I'm scared and peer pressure and I want everyone to be my friend.
The voice, it's there. I hear it.
There it is. Hey, guys.
Yes, it makes me so happy to hear that you'd understand. So thank you for answering such a
my pleasure.
Well, Danny, oh my gosh, what are you doing now? Are you going to break? Are you going to take a rest? I feel so lazy just reading your work.
I would like to take a nap. I would like to maybe write something funny next. This was kind of taxing. This is sort of pretty emotionally taxing in a way that I haven't experienced since I did The Butler.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've got a history of some drama.
Yeah, The Butler was the story of the civil rights movement over, decades. And that was writing those sequences was so emotional for me. And then writing this has been very emotional for me in a way. And I'm not like the super emotional guy where I'm like walking around shattered, So it kind of took a toll. And so I don't know what's next.
Okay, well, slapstick comedy, please. They do so well nowadays in American markets. So I'm sure you'll add right to that. Dopesick premieres October 13th. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Oh my God, this was the best. You were awesome.
No, you are my favorite. I'm so excited to be with you. This is literally like a 10-year journey for me as a huge Buffy fan. So thank you.
I love it. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Danny Strong for coming on the show, and thanks as always to Sharday Sellers for hosting. Dopesick is streaming on Hulu. And as always, thanks to you, our listeners. If you liked this episode, leave us a review, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For news about new episodes and more, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Final Draft Inc., and on Instagram at Final Draft Screenwriting. This podcast was produced by Kayla Guess and co-produced by Emma Vranich. Editing is by Sean Bonnet. Music is by T. Kelly. Thanks again, everyone. Until next time, right on.